the content of the psychedelic experience is, I believe, relating to that is the sum total of our humanness. And I think, based on experience, that there is a certain amount of leakage from the future backward into the past, and that many of the phenomena that are being interpreted as past lives and reincarnation and channeling and regression this and clairvoyant that, all this has to do with a misunderstanding about how causality actually works. That all of the impressions upon which people are building these models, channeling and spirit guides and reincarnation and so forth, the material upon which these models are being built is real, but the models that are being built are tremendous compressions of the reality of the situation. I mean, when someone tells me that they experienced a past life regression and that they were a butcher in 13th century Florence, I always think to myself, but you were a butcher in 13th century everywhere, and you were a butcher in 14th century everywhere. I mean, once the connection is opened, the connection is not particular. The connection is general. It is all reality is who you are. All reality is where you are and where you've been and where you will be. And two things are operating in the hidden dimension of the human mind. One of them is what I call the Gaian mind. And this is being imaged in this society as the rebirth of a kind of goddess. People are realizing on different levels and at different levels of sophistication that the energy of being can be imaged as a female entelechy, an enclosing, nurturing, caring, forgiving kind of entelechy. And this is what psychedelic shamanism has always been about. It's about a connection to the Gaian mind. And this gives you, obviously, a tremendous sense of being embedded in a larger coherency than merely the coherency of your own small life. And that's very empowering. But it's not the general sense of things that this Gaian mind imparts that is really, to me, the interesting part. It's that the Gaian mind is a real mind. It has information. It can tell you things of the most specific and personally important sort. It tells you where the game has gone. It tells you who poisoned the well. It tells you who raped so-and-so. It tells you why person X is ill and unable to get well. In other words, the Gaian mind is the database that all shamans seek to connect to in the act of curing, in the act of functioning as doctors for their society. They get a connection to the Gaian mind. And again, at this point, I feel like I have to remind you, I come to this as a skeptic, as a sneerer. I mean, I have no time for this stuff unless it's real. It happens to be real. You have to take psilocybin, as far as I can tell, to encounter it, at least if you have the kind of lump and neurophysiology that I have. I mean, I've never been with the etheric crowd, you know. But this Gaian empowerment is what allowed these societies to live without technology, without modern medicine, without remote sensing devices, without any of the appurtenances of technology that we take for granted. And we have lost this connection. We can't even imagine it. If someone were to begin talking about how the earth was speaking to them and giving them messages about how to live, you instinctively can sense this is something to be very, very careful with. You give that rap to the wrong person and they'll drop a net over you and you'll find yourself stuffing envelopes for a convalescent home or something. Okay, so that's part of it, the Gaian mind. And it is this feminine, nurturing, enfolding thing. It's the mind of nature itself. It is really our own mind, but extending then away from this possessive notion of our mind back into the general concept of mind itself. And then the other pole, or the other motif encountered in this situation is trickier to envision. I call it the transcendental object at the end of time. This, if we were, fanatically symmetrical model makers, then we would assign a kind of masculine value to this. But I'm not particularly into that. I just see it as the transcendental object at the end of time. But what it is it's a kind of attractor. And we're not accustomed to thinking of the historical situation as being under the influence of an attractor. We inherit our belief that history is being pushed rather than pulled. We inherit this idea from the 19th century when the theory of evolution was elaborated. These 19th century British atheists who were creating the theory of evolution were so horrified by the power of deism, meaning the belief in God per se, that they constructed a theory of evolution where everything is pushed from behind. In Darwinian evolution, there is no purpose. A good Darwinist never lets the word purpose cross his lips. A good Darwinist knows that things just happen randomly, and then natural selection makes its selection, and then you get whatever you get. And this is understandable in the intellectual atmosphere of the 19th century, that they would want to get away from that. The problem is we have matured now beyond the simple atheism of the 19th century, and it is now very reasonable, sanctioned by mathematics and dynamics and so forth and so on. It is now very reasonable to speak of an attractor. And this is, I'm also a little nervous to talk about this because part of what I do is I popularize. I tell you things which you should know yourself, or which you could know yourself if you would but go to a decent medical library and spend the time to look up all this botanical and pharmacological data. So I'm like a clearinghouse. But then there's another thing which I do, which I'm a little more nervous and touchy about, which is I tell you what I think. And it's just what I think. It has exactly that much weight behind it, which is like zip. I mean, you don't have to believe this. Why should you?
Okay, so I just wanted to see, I thought that was the most important part of this whole speech. And I had a different video here originally, of him in a forest or in his little garden talking, but I found this one more symbolic and just deeper. But as far as it being the ninth post, that's kind of why I didn't put anything, because, and it's called Harpers Harping. Again, it was about something else, like pretty much the whole 2012 Time Wave Zero thing, which I still think he was onto something, but it was more than just that particular date and year, though that year was obviously significant, because that's when all this knowledge came to a crescendo, and I had to start writing about it. And but what he says about the retro causality basically is, I think, one of the most important things, because it ties in with just the mathematics of what 9 represents. And 9, so, a lot of things came up into my mind. 9 is obviously in the Hebrew alphabet Teth, which means a snake or serpent. And 9, all the multiples of 9 reduced to 9, so it's like the serpent eating its tail. And 9 is the highest number, pretty much. After 9 is 10, but it regenerates back, into 1, because 10 reduces to 1. 11, 2. 9 is pretty much the highest number. And when you really take into account all the things about 9, especially with the Kabbalah, like 9 being Yesod, the foundation, and Yesod being like in the chakras, kind of like the what is it, the Svadhisthana, and it's basically where, obviously, humans have 9 months of 9 months for the gestation of a human being, basically. And 9 is just all about the womb, and when you add up 1 through 9, it's 45, which is Adam in Hebrew, and so symbolic of like the gestation of man, kind of. And the thing about 9 and the fall of Malkuth is the fall of 10 is really where the ego, or I, because Yod is pretty much I, and it's the 10th letter, the I crystallizes or comes into being, or really individuation, the whole duality and all that. There's a big link between 9 and 10 and 11, obviously, like the Kabbalah or Sefer Yetzirah says 10 and not 9, 10 and not 11 spheres. And 9 and 11, Kenneth Grant talked about as being the Ob and the Odd, or the astral light and the magical light, or the Odic light. And those are basically like the inner light and the outer light, or the astral body and the Qliphothic shell, or the illusion of manifestation, Maya. So 9 basically is this serpent force, the Kundalini, and it's associated with God in the sense that 9 is the creative, power. It's the totality. It's really the It's really the creative force, and that's kind of demonized, like the serpent is, even though it's pretty much like the foundation of creation or manifestation. And it's obviously like the whole gematria. When you look at the 999, 999, it's really it explains basically manifestation. And Kenneth Grant in the Ninth Arch obviously puts his own little database, which we've gone into. But all of his books, the Typhonian trilogies, are they go in depth, deep into the whole, like even the Masonic symbolism of the nine arches, under which the secret or lost Masonic word, the word of God, is contained, basically. And if you think about it, it's like the Kabbalah of 9 chambers, and the zero being really the unspeakable word, but the key of everything, or at least whatever is impressed on its field. And So it's really the key. The 0 is the key of it all, but it unlocks the Kabbalah of 9 chambers. And 666 is like a major key to that, obviously, but all of them are. But the Kabbalah of 9 chambers is 666. The whole Kabbalah is 666. The Kabbalah unveiled. It pretty much gives you the key. I mean, well, the Bible mentions 666 in 2 different spots. One, Kings 10:15 or 10 whatever, about the 666 talents of gold Solomon received, which obviously 666 being the solar number and gold associated with the sun. Again, it's a number of manifestation and the solar power. The word electric is 666, so it's all about the electric magnetic energy center force, which again has a negative or clefothic counterpart to it, as all the numbers do. And but really, nine, for all that is, I'm saying about it, it's really symbolic of basically what he was saying, of all this stuff in totality tied together. The root basically of deity or deism, D-E, is 9, because it's Daleth plus He, which, like, the root of gods or go is basically go. Crowley talks about how basically the gods go, and go would be 73, but you can also use Vav instead of An, and that would be 3 plus 6, so that's 9. 9 is HGA, or 5 plus 3 plus 1, the Holy Guardian Angel. And age, again, age would go with the whole gestation thing. Add, ADD, 1 plus 4 plus 4 is 9. Dad, which is like the father or God. So yeah, like 9 isn't just necessarily a female number or a male number, it's both pretty much. And again, Ob, Kenneth Grant actually says that Obeah, which connects with the Ob, and Obi is like African magic or witchcraft. Obeah, same thing, but he says it has its analog in the English word obey, which is like, related to the spell or the magic. And he talks about how 9 is especially related to witchcraft, and the formula of witchcraft, Alim, is 81, 9 times 9. Yasad in Hebrew is 80. There's a lot to that, basically. 81 being 9 times 9, and again, 9 and 10 and all this, it's where it crystallizes out. And so, like, the Hebrew number or letters, basically, there's 27. That's 3 cubed. 27. Kenneth Grant talks a lot about being related to Zion and this the secret doctrine, and what Helena Blavatsky and Crowley and all this stuff represents is this reaching. It's really like the serpent reaching towards Kether, but Blavatsky talks about how there's like 2 more elements left to manifest, and we're like humans will eventually develop another 1 or 2 more higher senses, given the right room to evolve. And I think that's an interesting idea, because I've even as a kid, I've always thought about colors and light. I was real interested in that, and I always wondered what else is beyond the color spectrum and the light spectrum, and so all this stuff about outside the circles of time, outer gateways, the Ninth Arch. It's all, I think Kenneth Grant. Well, he did. I mean, if you read it, he talks about all this, how these even fictional accounts overlap, because it's within a limited geometrical matrix. So these overlappings of ideas and concepts, and they have what you could call marmas, or connections, like pinpoints where these things overlap. Like numerically, it's because there's just a geometrical field of potentiality or possibility, and things are bound to overlap like that, which gives a lot of room for potential for creativity. And the mind naturally does that. It organizes things numerically, and that's how language is able to be processed so quickly. That's why someone can speak without really, like, they're thinking, like I'm thinking while I'm speaking, but I'm not sitting there analyzing it bit by bit. That's the subconscious. And again, the 9 connects with Yesod, and Yesod is the moon. The moon card on the Tree of Life is Koth, and that's associated with the back of the head. And Kenneth Grant talks about the back of the head and basically being the zone where the illusion of manifestation basically is created, where the kalas are combined, and it's basically the processing or the digital operating system of the brain. I don't know. It's just weird how much all of this is, apparent when you really look into it, using the knowledge that has been given for hundreds of years, and yet how the compartmentalization has kept all these different groups of people from linking all this knowledge together. The 9 being the astral light, and 11 being the artificial light. 11 again is egg in Hebrew, E or Hey, 5 plus Gimel 3. So that'd be 11. And then AI, artificial intelligence, is 11. All sorts of there's a lot of other 11s I can't think of at the moment, but basically it is about the shadow and the reflection and the simulation or simulacra or illusion cast by the 9. And that's why it's like all the multiples of 11 are really important too, just as much as the 9s are. I don't know, if you look at the tables, I don't have them pulled up right now. I really didn't know what direction this video would go, but if the tables of numbers and their multiples and the primes especially have a lot of unique Kabbalistic correspondences, but the patterns reveal a lot about the natural architecture of what you could call the matrix or manifestation, whatever you want to call it. And the numbers themselves, like the word manifestation, in its basic value is 321, which it looks like it's descending, because it pretty much is, but really it's ascending, because 1 and then 20 and then 300, it's ascending. But there's different ways of looking at the numbers, and I've found that in being able to see the abstract, or in some cases very obvious connections, like the 0 with the egg, it's that sort of elasticity and unfoldment and emergence that the sort of like not only one-dimensional but these like two-dimensional words or numbers can actually unfold into formation, or yet zero, or this whole idea of the 4 worlds, and the unfoldment or emanation. It's kind of how this stuff really unfolds. And so taking that into account, you can kind of reverse engineer anything and use gematria as a form of divination. And so that's why I think Crowley talks about the OTO secret and the secret of sex magic. Sex magic is really, again, the sex force, or Kundalini or Shakti force, the serpent force. And the secret being this whole, he says, I'll have to pull it up, but he says that their order possesses the key to basically all Masonic and Hermetic teachings, including and especially the teachings of sex magic. In that with that key, pretty much any lost knowledge could be restored. And that's because with the knowledge of basically the Kabbalah of 9 chambers, you can unlock certain aspects or areas of manifestation. And he was talking about this Gaian mind. Well, Gaia in its original Greek is 15, because it's gamma plus alpha plus iota alpha, so 3 plus 1 plus 10 plus 1. And that's the reflection of 15 is Mayot, 51, so that's kind of significant. But 15 is the sum of the across angles of the magical square of Saturn, and the magical square of Saturn is the Kabbalah of 9 chambers, or the calculator grid. And again, with that, pretty much, well, not everything can be calculable. There is a lot that is incalculable, but again, that's what you would call metaphysical or supramundane, because it falls outside of the lines. And so therefore, like, they would be determined or whatever, it would be called like unempirical or false or illusory, or so that's the problem with the mundane and Malkuth like level consciousness, is that we're looking for physical evidence and hard physical things, when true, like, that's really the nature of sattva in the whole Buddhist teachings and all that, is that reality, like for example, the dream is closer to reality or sattva or purity than waking, because the dream is less identified and less it's not as crystalline and dense. And so that's why I think a lot of like what he's saying about channeling and even the UFO phenomena is what you would call astral / etheric, astral being like the 9, or where the mind, or where the energy hasn't yet crystallized into being or formation. And that sort of idea is hard to talk about, because we're stuck in a linear, dense reality, like call it the cube or whatever. The tree of life, the ruach, basically the spheres underneath the abyss, is like a cube, but it's within Malkuth. And so, like, a lot of people are confused at the whole, like, with Malkuth and the cube. And Doth is obviously all about the space-time continuum in which the cube and all these angles manifest, and that's why XYZ being the egg, or 107, and all these connections basically symbolize this, literally like the crack in the cosmic egg, which I know there's a book about called that, but this crack in the cosmic egg basically is the 9, and it's the serpent coming out of the egg, which I'm likened to the 0 in the number spectrum. Once the numbers reach 999 or 999, like 9 repeating, it goes to 1,000, or a new world or microcosm is created, basically. And I think that's what Kenneth Grant kind of hinted at all this in his books. Like, he talks about Phineas Black, and I just discovered that was 999, and if you spell it with a cough final and cough final on the end of Black, he never mentions that, but 999 is obviously all about the Kabbalah, or the 9th arch, and the Kabbalah of 9 chambers, and he does talk about it being nymphy and related to basically the goddess, or the daughter, in the daughter cycle, the Eon of Maat, basically. I wish I could go into more. I'm not going to, though, because it's pretty much what this whole blog is all about. Again, I'm pretty much saying what shouldn't even have to be said, or shouldn't be said, but I know that some people don't know any of this stuff, and it would be, again, like, whenever I was first trying to learn all this stuff, I was surprised at what I didn't see and what I didn't read. And so I think it's good sometimes to put out new modes of, new models of looking at things, because it shows that, again, he's talking about these models and the tree of life and all these things, the formulas, they are just models, but some work better than others, and some models get outdated, and some models go to show how dynamic and how, magical in the sense of it's practical. You can use it for whatever it is you're, looking for, whatever your intentions are. I can't stop thinking about how this all just ties back to 9, how 9 just comes back to 9. And 9 is the chaos of the 1. The 1 is the order, 9 is the chaos. Obviously 11 really is more chaotic. It's the reflection, but 9 is where that schism happens. Between the 9 and the 10 is pretty much where I'd say the fall happens. And that's why you have the 1 and the 0. The 1 and the 0 never is the binary sequence, and they never really come together. And that's why they call the union of Hadit and Nuit the ever-coming one. Mayat would obviously be, like when you add up Ab, Amma, and Bin, father, mother, and son, it's 107, which implies the final Hey, because that's 107, the egg, the daughter, XYZ, which is the three-dimensional field. So Mayat is all about this, the time field, or the fourth dimension, and this the spiral of time. Again, 9. That's why, I mean, Doth it's dot, first of all, in Hebrew, D-O-T, forgot. It's related to basically a circle and going in a circle. And so there is a lot of repetition, and time itself is obviously cyclical. Cycles is 111, cyclic law is 111. 111 is all about this, obviously the fall, Aleph, and the rays into the three-dimensional field. And again, when you add up the triad, the supernal triad, Kether, Chakma, Binah, and then Doth, it's 1,234. So that shows the unfoldment and the mathematical template or model. And a lot of these things I don't think were intended. It's just they just happen. And that, again, it's with the fact that geometry is a limited field. It's the 0, and that's why 1 through 9 it cycles through. And again, the symbolism of the egg, the serpent, time, space-time, it's all pretty much it's all contained in the symbolism of the tree of life. And our language pretty much is like, English is like Kabbalah 2.0, it seems like. And I'm slowly decoding it, and I wish I knew more about basically making a web page, because I have all this data ready to go up, and it's I just need a little more time, and because so much more data has just been flooding. The more books I've been coming across and getting, the more information I've had to basically process. It was hard enough to keep up with last year's monthly posts, and so now I'm doing all these videos because I think I need a refresher. I need to go back over it, because every time I do, more and more just comes through and becomes clearer. These are Kenneth Grant's books, and I'm going to basically give an overview of them because I go into them a lot. And the main 9 books, known as the Typhonian Trilogy, even though it's 3 trilogies, a trilogy of trilogies. On the left is The Magical Revival, published 1972. Centers Aleister Crowley and the Hidden God, I believe, published 1973. Cults of the Shadow, 1974. No, actually 1975 was Cults of the Shadow. 1974 is when Liber Pene Penumbra was channeled by Nima and Hadna. Night Side of Eden, 1977. Outside the Circles of Time, 1980. Hecate's Fountain, 1992. Outer Gateways, 1994. Beyond the Mauve Zone, 1999. The Ninth Arch, obviously 2002. So yeah, he wrote the foreword to a few books. Dark Doorway of the Beast, that was 1992, the year I was born. This book isn't by Kenneth Grant, but it mentions him, and it's significant. It's by Frank Rappel. who's an Italian who runs some weird order and has a lot of insights in this book. It's called Sothenoram, The Magic of Atlantis. And here's Kenneth Grant's fiction books: Grist to Whose Mill, Snake Wand and the Darker Strain, The Other Child and Other Tales, Gamaliel, The Diary of a Vampire and Dance Doll Dance, and Against the Light, Convolvulus, which is his poems, At the Feet of the Guru, which is an series of essays on various Eastern mystics and Eastern mysticism. This book mentions Kenneth Grant and I found this at the store, and it's apparently hard to find, but it goes into Kenneth Grant and Parsons and the Babylon working. This is Peter Levenda's book on Kenneth Grant, which is decent. And this is a bit more interesting because it's about Frater Achad and Wilfred Talbot Smith and a few other people going on, and a few other people back in California, in the OTO. This book is by Don Carr, and he actually sent me Liber 107, which Liber and Dana, which they ended up channeling certain stuff about the egg in 107 in the 80s. But he wrote this book, Approaching the Kabbalah of Maat, which ties in with all this. But so a few other books Kenneth Grant wrote is Remembering Aleister Crowley, which is his memoir of pretty much living with Aleister Crowley and writing to him. And he made these cool, well, I think it was Steffi, but they had these cool murals that they made and put in the Cults of the Shadow, which I'll show you in a minute. But there's Zoss Speaks, which is his writings and encounters, obviously, with Austin Osman Spare. There's a lot of art in here. Spare. Here's some more letters and letters from Austin Spare to Vera Wainwright. I also have The Focus of Life, but I didn't pull that out. Then here's another really good book Kenneth Grant references a lot, called Images and Oracles of Austin Osman Spare. And this is about his just more about his art and sigils and all the things he does in his artwork. Here's a picture I had made of one of his. Here's Hidden Lore, which was him and his wife's art and writings, I guess before he even decided to write books. But there's a lot of really nice golden and colored pictures and symbols that she reconstructed. Steffi did, because she's the one who did all the art for all the trilogies and even the fiction. But so here's one of these murals. But yeah, the art in the trilogies is really interesting. It's very Typhonian and space agey. What am I forgetting? These books are important. The only one Kenneth Grant wrote in was contributed an essay, I believe. Yeah, here. he references this chapter text in, I believe, Hecate's Fountain, and it's just interesting because he talks about a lot of the lodge happenings and whatnot in that book. But this is the Voodoo Gnostic workbook by Michael Berteau, which references Kenneth Grant references, and it also references Grant. You can tell it's even got the same red bottom as Hecate's Fountain. Both talk about voodoo a lot. And then this is Thomas Carlson's Kabbalah, Qliphoth, and Goetic Magic, which is just important and goes along with Night Side of Eden and all the stuff about the Qliphoth. But this is obviously just Kenneth Grant's books, which are really important. And then you've got Crowley's, Equinox, and pretty much all of his books, which Kenneth Grant did contribute to the Magical Record of the Beast, Magic, the Confessions of Aleister Crowley, and also the Magical and Philosophical Commentaries with John Simons. But in the Magical Record of the Beast 686, which is edited by John Simons and Kenneth Grant, you can really see actually where Kenneth Grant got a lot of his very technical knowledge of everything pretty much Crowley said, because he edited his diary, well, this particular diary. There's also this diary edited by Stephen Skinner, who also edited the True and Faithful Relation, the Spirits in John Dee book. And but this both magical records give a lot of insight. Crowley wrote very long, entries into his diary, as you can see, and like this one, for example, Kenneth Grant and Simons. You can tell kind of where Grant is probably the speaker, because after reading his books, he talks a lot about the phallus and the Catius. And he says, Liber C, or 100, contains the secret instructions of sexual magic taught in the OTO. The number is derived from the initials of the two magical weapons in this instruction, P and K, phallus and Catius, 80 and 20. The full title of Liber C is The Book of the Unveiling of the Sangreal. And a lot of these little notes are very important to, and Grant has them throughout his books. But there's multiple, grade papers for the OTO, and particularly the subject of sex magic. In the official secret rituals of the OTO, which I also have like a bootleg Lulu version, which actually contains De Arte Magica, and because in the original one, Francis King left it out and published it in Sexuality, Magic, and Perversion. But basically, there's the secret instructions of the 7th, 8th, and 7th, 8th, and 9th degrees of the secret marriages of gods with men, the secret instruction of the 8th degree, De Nuptiis Secretis Deorum Cum Hominibus, which I've read all of these books, or these libers, and published the videos pretty much a year ago by now. And finally got these physical copies of the books, because they've slowly come to me. Here's Liber C, which Grant just mentioned. The only thing is there's no De Arte Magica. Here's Of the Homunculus, which is Liber 367. See this book? In this book there's the same things, just in a different font. It's in this text, basically, that Here it says, the supreme secret of the OTO is written in detail in the book called Agape and is written plainly in Liber 333, chapter 36. But now also do we think it fitting to add our own comment to this book Agape, which we wrote in our own words for the proper setting forth of this secret taught us at our initiation to the 9th degree by the OHO, and this book has received his official approbation in every word thereof. But in this comment do we not set forth the secret itself, rather on the contrary guarding it by certain subtleties even from the conjecture of the unworthy, but only our own ideas as to its right use, and with other matters germane, thinking that those into whose hands it may come may thereby understand more fully the utter importance of this secret as having been the pivot of our working, and further that it may aid such persons to attain perfectly the mastery of this holy and imperial art. This secret is the true key to magic, that is, by the right use of this secret man may impose his will on nature herself, as will appear hereafter in this comment. In this way, although all recorded knowledge were destroyed, it would be possible for an adept of this secret to restore it. It's in Sexuality, Magic, and Perversion, chapter 10, which is pretty interesting, actually, if you read it. And there's PDFs of this book. In 1912, Royce revisited Crowley and accused him of revealing the innermost secret of the 9th degree of the OTO in one of his published works. Crowley was astonished. He pointed out to Royce that he wasn't even a member of the 9th degree of the OTO, and so was hardly likely to be in a position to reveal its secrets. Silently, Royce produced a copy of Crowley's Book of Lies and opened it at page 46, the ritual of the Star Sapphire, which begins, "Let the adept be armed with his magic rood and provided with his mystic rose," and clearly has a sexual import. Crowley was thunderstruck. In a flash, the sexual magic of the OTO was understood by him. For hours, the two adepts talked. It was agreed that Crowley should become the head of a new order to be called the Mysteria Mystica Maxima, an English subsidiary of the OTO. It says, or Crowley said, the curious thing is, however, that the Book of Lies was not published until 1913, almost a year after Royce had made his visit. Either there had been a slip in time and Royce and Crowley were a year in advance of everyone else, as Crowley seems to imply in his confessions, or, rather more likely to say the least, it was some other passage in Crowley's writings that Royce felt betrayed the sexual secrets of the 9th degree. A third possibility is that the title page of the Book of Lies gave a false date of publication, and that it was in reality published in 1912. There is some evidence that this may have been the case, for at the back of the book was an advertisement for Crowley's other books, charmingly headed The Excreta of Mr. Aleister Crowley. In the only number of Crowley's magazines, the Equinox advertised number 7, published in March 1912. If the Book of Lies had been published in 1913, one would have expected the advertised issue of the Equinox to have been either number 9 or number 10. So that's odd. At about the same time, either Crowley or one of his disciples produced a verse ritual published in mutilated form in Equinox 10, designed to be used as a prelude to the sexual intercourse of the 9th degree. As this ritual contains some points of interest, I reproduce it below. Its first printing in unexpurgated form. The Supreme Ritual. Let a feast be made by the officers of the temple. The temple into which they retire may be any convenient place. An altar is necessary, also a vessel of wine, otherwise as may be appointed by them, e.g. the robes, etc., as said in Liber Legis. The officers are 2 in number, and they seek Nuit and Hadit through the vagina and the penis. They conceal themselves, so they are disguised as Isis and Osiris. The officers meet and clasp hands above the altar. Any preliminary operations, such as opening, banishing, etc., are now done by O, who returns and they again greet, but as initiates. Crowley himself said that the ritual is found in the papers of Adam Weishaupt, the 18th century founder of the sect of the Illuminati, but internal evidence shows this to be quite impossible. I have seen a copy in the hand of Victor Neuberg, the poet who, many years after he had broken with Crowley, discovered Dylan Thomas. It may be that Neuberg wrote the ritual, but I think it probable Crowley himself had at least some hand in its composition.
So, O and I, face to face. I, what is the hour? O, when time hath no power. I, so Isis, what is the place? Osiris, at the limits of space. What god do we wake? The lord of the snake. With what do we serve? Brain, muscle, and nerve. The shrine in gloom? She gives the sign of a babe of the abyss, which Osiris destroys by the sign of Mentu the god. The god of Mentu is usually shown with his left hand resting between his thighs, the fingers clenched and the thumb extended. The significance is clearly sexual. Osiris, is the mouth of thy womb, and the priest in the shrine? Is this monster of mine? O repeats sign of Mentu, and I gives sign of Baphomet. In the wonder above, the quintessence of love. There are sacraments, 9. There are music and wine, and the delicate dance, to accomplish the trance. And are these 3 enough? They are servants of love. And the sacrifice? I. And the priestess is thou. I am willing to die at thy hands, even now. Worship me first. O seats Isis upon the altar. Osiris, mistress, I thirst. I gives wine, they both drink. Isis, my mouth is on fire to my lord's desire. They exchange the holy greeting by a kiss. Osiris, I kneel at thy feet, and the honey is sweet. Isis plays music while Osiris worships in silence. Exhausted, I sink. I am dead on the brink. Isis, let us dance. Osiris, let us dance. O and I, the Lord gives us power to be lost in the trance for an hour, for an hour. They dance together, a pause of perfect stillness and silence follows until Isis, of her own accord, advances and places Osiris upon the altar. Exhaust me. Osiris, nay, drink. Isis, ere I sink. Osiris, I shall sink. Drink wine, O drink wine. I am thine, I am thine. They drink and greet as before. Osiris, art thou armed? Isis, with a knife. Isis draws the dagger from her hair. Osiris, love is bitter than life. Isis cuts a eye, or if possible, the sigil of Nox on O's breast. Isis, let us dance. Osiris giving wine to the trance. They drink, then dance. Isis, back to the throne. Osiris returns and takes seat thereon. Osiris, I adore thee alone. Isis does so, plays music if so inclined, and continues as necessity or inclination may dictate. Isis, it is ended, the play, I am ready to slay. Anoint me. Osiris, I rise to the fire of thine eyes, I anoint thee, thy priest, Babylon and the beast, and I ask of thee now, who art thou? Omari, Tassala, Marax, etc. The ritual is now in silence accomplished. 9th degree, i.e. ritual sexual intercourse, closing. Osiris, mouth to mouth and heart to heart. Isis, for the moment we must part. Time and space renew the illusion, love is swallowed in confusion. Love sustains as eminent till the hour of sacrament. I love you and you love me, now and ever may it be. Osiris and Isis, hand in hand is heart to heart. Love be with us, though we part. They greet as before and depart.